Hi, this is Dustin with Dustin's Dollars. Today I'm going to be talking about Delphin LNG and a potential ticker that is related, TGLO, which is theglobe.com. I will explain this in a little bit. Before I begin, let me remind you that I am not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions that I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I do not hold any position in Delfin LNG, it's a private company at the moment, or TGLO, which is, I think, publicly traded. I think I'll be mentioning them, so just for full transparency, I do hold a long position in both Tellurian and Next Decade, although those are not necessarily the specific focus of this video. But I mention all that just so that you know this video should be for your entertainment purposes only, because I could be wrong about everything that I say in this video. You need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. So, I got this comment a couple days ago, I think on Saturday, from Troy D on one of my prior videos. So thank you, Troy, for the comment. And he asked, what do you think about the Delphin LNG project? And we had just a very quick back and forth, but he brought this to my attention and it was interesting. And so I spent a good chunk of time reading up on this and learning about it. And so I wanted to share with you what I've found so far and what I've learned. If you want to go read for yourself, there's a fair bit of information about Delphin LNG and the project on their website, which I'll get to in a moment, but at delphinmidstream.com. Feel free to go look that up yourself. They have a corporate presentation from December of 2021, so it's not exactly bleeding edge recent, but it is not super out of date, I hope. And then as Troy D linked here, there's lots of good info on Investor Hub, which is a website. You search for Investor Hub, TGLO, and you will find some stuff there that has some information. So I wanted to share with you some of what I've found there and some of the other stuff that I've looked at today in this video. So, overview of Delphin LNG. This is another similar to, not exactly similar, and I'll get into this, but similar in at the very highest level to Tellurian and Next Decade. It is a proposed LNG export facility in the United States. What makes Delphin a little bit interesting and distinct from the other companies that I mentioned is they are looking to build these floating LNG vessels, and these are, I guess, ships that actually are the export facilities. This nice diagram here, there's a nice picture that shows in a nutshell what it is that they're looking to do. And I'm specifically talking about Delphin LNG here. There's even another potential project over here, which I think would be a potential future expansion for the company. But the first project here of Delphin LNG is up to 4 of these floating LNG vessels, that each of which can liquefy 3.5 million tons per year in terms of the actual amount of gas. And by the way, if this is, if you're unfamiliar, a lot of my viewers have a lot of context with Tellurian and Next Decade and the LNG, so some of the lingo and terminology. If you're less familiar, watch some of my older videos about Tellurian and or Next Decade. I think it explains this a bit more, if this is unfamiliar to you. But I'm going to keep going because a lot of people I think who watch are familiar. So they're looking at building these 4 LNG vessels that are the export facilities, and like I say, overall, in total, this would be 13 million tons per year in terms of its capacity. They have full permits for this right now, and they talked about that they believe they are low cost in terms of in the scheme of other projects, and I will go actually into that in a little bit of a comparison in a couple of minutes. But they also, one super interesting thing that they are doing here is that they can treat each one of these vessels as their own project, and so they can reach a final investment decision on one vessel without having to have sold a large portion of the 13 million tons per year of offtake. They really only need to sell enough for them to reach a positive final investment decision on the first vessel, and they can do this for each vessel individually. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and that's kind of an overview of the project. They do, Delphin Midstream, I think, is already an operating company and owns this pipeline here that can feed gas to the vessels. And as another note here, they are looking at selling the LNG as a index to Henry Hub, right? They say standard sales and purchase agreement offer of 115% of Henry Hub plus $2 for 20 years. They have some other terms, and it does go into a bit of details in this slide deck, or I think it was here, maybe it was somewhere else. That gives you an idea. And sorry, let me bring up my notes just for one moment. Give me a second here. I think that touches on the highlights of the project, right? It's fully permitted. They have the feed gas problem already solved, and they have the design for this, and they've done a lot of engineering already for the project. Now they are looking to actually sign agreements for folks to actually take the LNG, and then they're hoping to reach a final investment decision this year, at least on the first vessel. I don't think they were specific on that, but one would assume that this is at least the first vessel, right? That's the smallest unit at which they're going to make a final investment decision. So the other major piece of news that just happened last week, and I think this is probably maybe prompted the comment from Troy asking me this, and maybe some of the recent chatter about the company, is that they actually did sign their first, I believe it was their first sales and purchase agreement with Vitol for 500,000 tons per year. So that would be only a portion of what they need in order to reach a final investment decision. But they, are starting to, they're actually getting agreements here. And sorry, I'm trying to find if it is in this or if it was in another article. But basically, yeah, this underscores it right here that as a modular project, right? Modular meaning each one of those vessels are individual. They only need, 2 to 2.5, and let's just call it 2.5 million tons per year of long-term contracts to actually get their FID, right? So they don't, unlike, Tellurian or Next Decade, where their first phase is like 11 million tons per year, and so they need to sell a good portion of that, right? 6 to 9, somewhere in that vicinity. In order to actually, they believe, secure the financing, because they can build these on a vessel per vessel basis. The capacity of each vessel, again, is 3.5 million tons per year. And so they really only need to sell about 2.5 before they believe they can actually get the financing and make a final investment decision. So that I thought was, pretty interesting. And they did call out in this another article, they had a quote here where they're saying, we're seeing basically they're seeing a lot of interest, and they say they only need 2 or 3 buyers in order to actually get the offtake for the first vessel. And I can't find the quote. Anyways, somewhere in here they have something that says they've signed some other non-binding agreements with some other companies, and that they believe, once they just actually execute those and make them binding agreements, they basically they're very, very close to selling everything, at least for the first vessel, and reaching a final investment decision this year. Sorry that I can't actually find it. Maybe it's in here, maybe it's not. I ended up not doing a good job with my notes here, so I apologize for that. This also, I think, here talked about the impact in terms of revenue. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, so they say this is approximately, this one agreement for 500,000 ton per year is roughly $3 billion in revenue over 15 years. So if you do just a tiny bit of math here, just to give you a sense of the scope of this size of this company, of what the opportunity is, right? This would be $3 billion, let's call it $3,000 million, over 15 years would be $200 million in revenue per year. Figure, if that 15%, 115% of a Henry Hub plus $2 for 20 years, let's, go on a limb here and say that they're getting, maybe that 15% could turn into their actual earnings or their free cash flow. And so if that was 15% free cash flow, that would be $30 million of free cash flow for that 500,000 ton of offtake. Their first vessel is 7 times that, right? So we're looking at, again, just based on that assumption, I am not sure in this particular presentation or anywhere else if they've disclosed what their expected earnings or free cash flow would be from that revenue. So I sort of just made up. I'm just looking at that 15% as a ballpark number, and I could be way off. Again, I don't think that they've just disclosed this, and obviously that would be the best place for us to get that from. But if it was 15%, just hypothetically, that would be $210 million per year in free cash flow for that first vessel once they get that ongoing, assuming that all the agreements are, similar profit margin. And so that's what we could be looking at, right? And that's for their first vessel, right? Multiply by 4 for this entire project, because they might have, up to 4 vessels here for 13 million tons per year in total capacity. So that gives you a sense of the scale of this company. Now, one of the things that they called out here that I thought was super interesting is they say we're a low-cost U.S. LNG, exporter, $550 per metric ton per year, and in capital expenditures, right? And so I wanted to actually compare that against what is it for Tellurian in next decade. And so if we look at Tellurian's costs, this is from their November 2021 presentation. I felt that was the best comparison against the numbers that Delphin has put out, because those numbers were as of December of 2021. And so Tellurian's cost per metric ton was $710, right? So this is actually a fair bit lower for phase 1. Let me make this clear that you can see here for Tellurian, the cost gets lower in the later phases, right? Because I think there's a lot of initial site prep work that goes into this first phase, and then the later phases do not include the same, do not have to include that work because it's already been done. They get to piggyback off of it. But Delphin LNG does not have to do that. If we look at next decade, we have something very similar where we say, hey, if they actually just do phase 1, their cost is $638 per ton. And then if they go up to the 3 trains, right? The phase 1 for them, I think, is intended to be two trains, which is 11.74 billion tons per year. If they go up to the 3 trains and they're an even larger capacity, right? They get to actually, some of that initial site prep work gets to be spread across even more LNG, so you sort of are dividing it up a bit more, and that lowers your cost per ton because there are more tons that you are dividing some of that site prep work against or across, and so that gets down to 568 per ton. But this is a much larger facility, right? And one of the things that Delphin is calling out here is saying, look, we're a low cost facility, even if we're only 3.5 million tons per year. And they actually have this interesting chart here that basically shows it, where they say, look, these larger facilities, sure, they can lower their cost of LNG per ton once they reach scale, right? If I actually am, again, if I'm getting up to almost 18 million tons per year, I can lower my cost to 568 per ton. Those are the numbers from next decade. However, Delphin is saying, look, we can get to the 550 for a new build, and I haven't, they have a separate sort of number for if they're doing some sort of a conversion. But for a new build, they believe they can get to 550, even at 3.5 million tons per year in terms of the scale that they are needed. So I thought that was a pretty interesting aspect of it. So that at least gives you some bit of a comparison there. Now, let me go on to one of the other things that make this complicated, interesting and complicated, and what I spend a lot of time reading about is Delfin LNG is not currently publicly traded. They are private. And so let me just go ahead and minimize this window, go to this one. So they are not publicly traded, they're private, but there is a lot of speculation that they are going to perform a merger or reverse merger, something along those lines. I am not, again, let me remind you, not a financial professional, and so I'm not very well versed in this stuff. But they're going to do that with a company called theglobe.com, which is publicly traded, as a ticker, it is TGLO. And the filings that we see are that Delfin LNG took a stake. Let me zoom in for you, sorry, so you can maybe read this. So this is years ago, right? This is from reported December 20th, 2017, this filing here. This is a filing for TGLO, where Delphin, they entered into an agreement. Delphin is going to purchase the vast majority, 70.9% of the stock of theglobe.com. Real quick, I should take a moment and say theglobe.com was a website, sounds like some sort of a like social media type thing, communities type thing, from many years ago. At this point, it is just a shell company. And I think if you look at the 10 Qs, and sorry, I don't know if there's like an official definition of shell company, but it basically doesn't do anything There's no operations for the company. So, but they are still there. They are still publicly traded. They still have all these 10Qs and 10Ks that they're filing. But there's just not much going on, right? There's not much in those documents. And the company, I don't think, is really doing much other than still being compliant by meeting these reporting requirements in order to be publicly traded on the OTC at least. And so when we're talking about this, it's kind of a weird thing, right? Why is Delphin going to buy all the stock of this, shell company that was sort of like a failed website from years ago, social media type thing? And basically, this is the actual agreement when they decided to purchase it. And I don't know if this one, I don't think this one just talks about the common stock purchase agreement, but the 13D that was filed by Delphin, and actually by Delphin's parent company, I think it was Fairwood. If I understand correctly, this is the parent company for Delphin, but they basically said, Delphin is the one who's doing this. We're just parent company. We don't really have any stake in it, or we're not have nothing to do there, right? So they actually go down here in the 13D, and they do talk about. I'm just going to get right to it. That it is anticipated. Let me find the actual thing. Delphin Midstream currently anticipates that it may enter into an agreement with the issuer to merge into the issuer, sell its assets to the issuer, or otherwise consolidate all or substantially all of the issuer's business with Delphin Midstream. So this is the source of the potential speculation that, sooner or later, Delphin is going to do some sort of a merger, with the Globe, and sort of the Globe will now be completely gone, and they'll probably, I would imagine if they did that, they would rename it, they would change the ticker, but that they would basically use this existing company that is already publicly traded and not do their own individual IPO or DPO or any other public transaction. They would actually merge in order to become a publicly traded company. And this filing, I don't think that I mentioned, this 13D was filed shortly after that common stock purchase agreement, and this was filed in December 31st of 2017. So this has been years ago. There's obviously now renewed interest in Delphin as they sign this purchase agreement for LNG with Vitol. And so that's why we're talking about it. That's why I'm talking about it today and why it piqued my interest. But what I wanted to do here was actually go back and look at, part of the other reason I should say is both Tellurian and Next Decade did some sort of a merger. I've read the term reverse merger. I'll be honest, I'm not a financial professional. I don't actually understand what is the difference there. I don't know what reverse merger specifically means. I have a general understanding of what a merger is. And when I get down into it, I just have to read all these filings and sort of see what are they saying happens where. But I went back and looked at both Tellurian and Next Decade and what happened with their mergers at the time, just to get a bit of a picture of what they did. And so I found the announcement this is from Tellurian. The company they merged into was Magellan Petroleum. And this was the first announcement that I saw. This is from August 3rd of 2016. And at the time, they did this, and basically the details here on what happened in terms of investors who held the Magellan stock, because I'm looking at that perspective because I actually am interested in what's going to happen for holders of TGLO stock, right? Because that's actually the security that is available to us as common investors, right? As retail investors right now. And so at the time, what happened was Magellan holders got to keep their shares. Folks who own Tellurian, in interest in Tellurian, got to receive 1.3 shares of Magellan. So basically, that this doesn't really give me enough information to know too much, but they say, Magellan will issue a whole bunch of stock to Tellurian shareholders. And so the Tellurian shareholders are now going to own about 95% of the, outstanding common stock after the merger. So the existing Magellan shareholders really only held a tiny, tiny chunk of the post-merger company, right? About 5%. So I thought that gives you one point of reference there. Now Magellan, just as a bit of context, I did a bit of reading. It looks like Magellan was not in a great place, and they kind of sold off all the rest of their assets and didn't have a whole lot of didn't have a whole lot to show for it at the time. And so it's not surprising that the holders of Magellan, of this company that really didn't have much going on when they did this merger with Tellurian, that actually only represented a small fraction of the final company. Now, if we jump over to Next Decade, who also did a merger, they did a merger with a blank check corporation, SPAC. I think most of the time we're calling these today. And I don't know if technically it was a SPAC or just a blank check corporation, but they did this. And sorry, I made myself just a bit of notes on this one. I guess I didn't say too much, but the existing company, that was the SPAC was Harmony Merger Corporation. The current, all right, so this is saying the current Harmony stockholders will own approximately 13.4% of the combined company immediately following the merger. So here we have another data point where basically the existing company that was, the Harmony Merger Corporation, in the end, after the merger, ended up only being a small fraction of the final, the final business. And so in both of these instances, it's 5% for Tellurian, 13.4% for Next Decade. The existing stockholders of that other company that was being used sort of as a target to do the merger, they did not actually hold very much in the end. I did take a quick look at what happened to the stock price of both the Magellan Petroleum shares and the Harmony Merger shares when these announcements were made, right? I didn't go too further because I think that's it's a lot harder. There's so many specifics to deal with, but I was just curious what happened at that time. And the interesting thing is let me zoom in a little bit. By the way, I exported this data from Yahoo Finance, so that is my source for this historical daily data. Closing price for the Magellan Petroleum, when they were doing this merger with Tellurian, that was announced right about here, where you see the value of the shares start to tick up. And so I thought it was interesting that in the Tellurian case, the value of these shares was, about 120, $1.20, $1.15, somewhere in that vicinity. Then on August 3rd, when this, when this Magellan Petroleum thing was announced, right? You look at this, and actually the stock doubled on that one day, and then the stock went up to $6 about a week later. And you can see that in this chart here. And so that one, for folks who held Magellan Petroleum, worked out very well for them. You can see they made a bunch of money in a very short amount of time. Who knows how long they had held it before that, right? I'm not saying that anybody would have been smart enough to, buy in on July 31st and then sell on August 14th for, a quick 4x. I mean, that would be amazing had anybody done that. Maybe even a 5x here, I guess, $1.20 to $6, which is ridiculous gains in such a short period of time. But just for something to as a point of comparison, you can see there is one place where it worked out very well. Now, on the other hand, for Next Decade, the announcement was made in the middle of this time period. It was made, as I said, on March 13th, 2017. That was when this was filed, when the press release was released. And you can see March 13th is right about here. And it stayed very flat, right? And this is because it was a SPAC, right? They had, roughly $10 of cash on the books and nothing else at the time. $10 of cash per share, I should say. And, that continued to be true. And so really the value didn't change too much. Like it barely changed at all in terms of actual numbers. It went from, March 1st, 2017, closed at 10.17. As of March 31st, closed at 10.21. So practically no change. Granted, that's a completely different situation, than what Delphin and what the Globe stock is in. But, again, just another interesting point of reference. That's what happened there. And now if we look at the Globe, just a super quick overview here, because I know this video is already pretty long. Right now they're at a market cap of like $60 million. So you really have to wonder what's going to happen here. And I closed the, let me open back up real quick. The all SEC filings for TGLO. We can see the most recent 10Q. So the interesting thing is, let me just open this up, HTML. Yeah, so the other interesting thing is, as I said, I believe it actually says in here that they are a shell company. Indicate whether the register is a shell company. Yes, they are. They are a shell company. I think, as they say here, they became a shell company years ago when they sold off all their prior assets. Now, but the interesting thing is that they do keep getting funding from Delphin, and this has happened. As I said, that they originally Delphin bought in what did I say, 2018, I think, years ago, maybe end of 2017, roughly 2018, and in March 2018, the company got a loan, a promissory note from Delphin, and it was originally, I don't know what the original size was, but they upped it to $150,000. They've been upping it and upping it and upping it, and they just upped it again in April 2022 to $791,000. It does accrue interest, but they're not actually paying any of it. They're not actually paying cash back to Delphin, as far as I can see here. And the promissory note is due upon demand. They haven't demanded that yet, and so Delphin keeps funding it, right? So clearly they are keeping this company around for a reason. They're not spending a whole lot of money, right? It looks like if we just do some quick math, figure they're up to, what's that, 791,000 since what's that, 4 years, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 4 years, 5 years, somewhere in that vicinity. Just call it 4 years. They spend about $200K per year. For a lot of, I think for Delphin, I don't know how much money they make, but that might not be very much for them. They're keeping this company around, and the Globe. So clearly they view it as being worth something to them to actually, and I would speculate to say that it is the option that they have to merge into this company in the future. By being a super majority shareholder, they can do whatever they want with the company in the future. If they decide they do want to merge, they have the 70% of the outstanding stock, so they can do that vote if they want. So overall, hopefully that gives you a lot of context here. My general opinion is, this is a kind of a weird and complex situation. It's just a big unknown, right? We don't know what could happen with this stock, right? Right now it's trading at 14 cents, and it's really hard to say what portion of this existing stock is going to sort of be carried forward, and what portion of the final company would it represent if they even ever do this merger, right? There's nothing definitive or even like intention set right now. They stated it in that 13. They stated it in the 13D as an option that it, and said, hey, it may enter into an agreement to merge, but it's not definitive. It's not even a stated intent, let alone being some sort of a definitive agreement. And even if they have this, right, I think even if we knew that they were going to do it, there's a huge risk that effectively the stock is going to end up being 1% or 0.01% of the final company, which would render the existing shares effectively useless, right? So I think that's a big, huge question mark for me, and why I'm personally not going to probably buy any of the stock right now. It's something I'm going to keep my eye on. If they do announce something, right, that's the point at which we have more concrete numbers, and we can start to run models and see, hey, what is a TGLO stock going to represent in the post-merger company, and what do the financials look like for all of this, and then maybe we could start to compute a value at that point. Because I think the overall business, right, I as I've talked about many times on my channel, I like Tellurian, and I like Next Decade. I think this would be a great opportunity if Delphin, it probably would be a great opportunity, depends on the price, if Delphin LNG was publicly traded, and maybe someday it will be after this merger, if it ever happens with TGLO. But I mean, I would just call it out as this is a super, super high risk situation right now if you're investing in TGLO. Again, not financial advice. Don't take financial advice from me. Don't make decisions based on what you see here. But please use this, to further your research and what you're doing here. So, that was a long video, and there's nothing on the chat today, so I'm just going to end it here. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.